My BMW X3M is severely damaged. It's not got one, but two bent chassis legs. It's got a gaping hole in the strut tower. The inner wing is absolutely mashed. Every airbag's gone inside it. And that's just scratching the surface of the problems with this car. So in the last video, I introduced you to our new project, the BMW X3M competition. And this is by far the biggest risk I've ever took on a car. With chassis damage, which I've never dealt with before, and interior damage, which I've never seen before. This car is definitely going to be a challenge, and there's definitely going to be some nasty surprises. Now, we did have some question marks over the condition of the engine, but after bridging the oil cooler and putting some fresh oil in, it actually sounded okay on the first start up. I'm in shock, mate. That's wicked. But that doesn't mean that we're done with this engine, because it's got to come out to fix all of the chassis damage. And it'd be mad not to upgrade it while we're there, but getting it out is going to be a mission of its own. So it doesn't really seem like a job that you'd easily be able to do yourself. So in this video, we're going to try and do it ourselves. We've got so much work to do to get this car back to a bare chassis, so we can start looking at replacing those bent legs and strut tower. Which, in a garage as small as mine, is definitely not going to be an easy task. Because although on camera sometimes it might look quite big in here, we have about 1.5 meters at the back, and about the same at the front. So the first step to getting this 500 horsepower 6-cylinder engine out is getting the exhaust off. Let's see if we can get this done. So the first step is getting the car up in the air on the quick jacks, and then it's straight underneath to remove the body brace, which is going to stop the exhaust from coming out. And once that's off and out of the way, we've now got access to remove the exhaust from the car. So we're going to start from the downpipes and work our way backwards. So once we unplug the exhaust valves, we can start doing the downpipe bolts. Snapped.
Yeah, snapped. Nice.
So with a hat trick of snap bolts and one missing, I'd say someone's possibly been here before. So then instead of removing the exhaust rubbers, we just remove the brackets which hold the rubbers to the car. And then using a jack to support the weight of the exhaust, we could then slowly lower it away from the car. Although there was still one small fixing which we missed, so we had to undo that whilst it was dangling. One exhaust removed, but there is a problem with space in the garage because we can't come out this way, so we're going to have to open up the door over here and slide it out the door that way. And as you can see from rebuilding cars, it's almost like I live in a scrapyard, but I'm sure I can get that dealt with pretty soon. But the exhaust is now out and in storage. So then it was off with the heat shields, which hide the prop.
Thank you, Thomas.
And with all of those removed, we can now access the prop to remove the bolts from it and then separate that, so then we can leave that on the car whilst the gearbox gets removed. And then using what is probably the complete wrong tool, we can then separate the prop from the donut and then pull that off the spline, so then that is free from the gearbox. And then there was just a couple of electrical connectors on the gearbox which we had to remove, because the last thing we want is to cause any wiring damage when removing all of this from the body of the car. So now we've got the exhaust off and everything done underneath at the back anyway. We've moved the car backwards as far as we can, so we've got as much room at the front to try and get that big engine out. Safe to say it's pretty close at the back. So I thought I'd make a start on the wiring, and on BMWs it's actually pretty simple because there's just multiple plugs going directly to the ECU, so you can just unplug it from there and leave everything connected to the engine. And now I've got all of those removed, I want to remove the steering column from the steering rack so they separate nicely when we drop the subframe, which you can just about make out that I'm doing here. And then me and Tom set about removing the complete scuttle panel to make sure that we can see and access everything that we need to get this engine out. So then it's off with the wipers and unclipping the windscreen scuttle. Then underneath that there's another body brace which needs removing, which is only held in with 4 bolts, so once that's removed we finger tighten them back into their place. And then there was a lower section of the scuttle which also needs removing for us to be able to see down the back of the engine. Now the bonnet hinges here started to get in the way, so we can get those removed along with the gas struts too. Now I believe this is on most modern cars, but there's actually a pin that fires in the bonnet hinge which pushes up the back of the bonnet and then takes away some of the impact from a potential pedestrian that's hit the front of it. So we're going to need to replace that. So it works correctly and we've got no warning lights on the dash. But that's a long way off yet. Now the aircon system had lost all its pressure in the crash, as is normal, but we still need to make sure that we remove all of the aircon lines and also the coolant pipes, which might get in the way of us lowering this engine out the bottom of the car. The next thing to clear out the way is the ECU and the casing, so there's just 2 bolts holding that in. And after a few hours graft, it really does feel like we're starting to make some progress now, and this engine is nearly ready to come out. So after a lot of aircon pipes, coolant pipes, plugs, I think we're about clear. We've got nothing that I can see attached to this chassis rail that's going to stop the engine going down there. The only thing here is the UJ for the steering column rack. Apart from that, this side is pretty clear anyway. The only things we've got left to do, I think, Thomas, is the wheel situation. So we've got to disconnect the brake lines, we've got to unplug the ABS sensors and brake wear sensors. I think once we've done that, we should just be able to take the subframe bolts out, and just as easy as this, it's just going to lower itself. Cool. Let's see if that optimism, I like it. So we undid the brake lines and let them drain into this bottle, and then lowered the car back down onto skates, which is then going to allow us to move the subframe and engine around fairly easily, hopefully, and then using the quick jacks we can lift the car away from the engine and then pull that out. That's the plan anyway. Whether it's going to work or not, we'll see. Okay, so here we go, moment of truth. We've only got 2 more subframe bolts to remove and the top mount bolts, and the engine, gearbox and all the front wheels and everything like that should come with it. Maybe, we'll see, possibly, probably, potentially. So now, with all 6 subframe bolts removed, the only thing holding this entire subframe to the car is the top mounts for the suspension. So there's 3 bolts on either side for that, and then we can look at lifting the car away. The idea of doing a job like this used to horrify me, but it's actually not too bad once you break it down into little bits and do it in manageable bites. The more I work on cars, the more obvious it's becoming. They're just like one big jigsaw puzzle. Everything goes on in a certain way and comes off in a certain way. It's just about using what you've learnt in the past and how to take certain parts apart. So with the wheels and the gearbox on a dolly, we can now use the quick jacks to lift the body of the car away from the subframe and engine. And I'm praying at this point there's nothing that we've missed, because if there is, it could cause quite expensive damage. But with a bit of jiggling to get one of the top mounts released, we could then lower the jack down and also raise the car up a tiny bit more, which then gave us the room to push out the complete subframe and gearbox. And it was massive. Where I'm going to put this, I have no idea, but it doesn't matter because we've done what we aimed to do. We've got this engine out of the car. Okay, so here we go. I'm trapped in the corner now, but here we have the X3M engine, gearbox, and complete subframe and suspension, everything here removed from the car. And, well, it wasn't too bad actually, was it? It could have been worse.
Could have been a lot worse than that, it was alright.
And looking at this sat on my garage floor, it seems nuts to me that I've got the confidence to do this now, and still with fairly basic tools, I'm going to be tackling the biggest job which I've ever done, and it's sat there staring at me. I'd be lying if I said I was confident in the condition of this engine even though we started it, but it's definitely not dead. So in the videos in the future, while we've got time on this engine, I've decided I want to try and make some time to improve the condition of it by servicing the bits which you wouldn't normally be able to get to, because I want this car to work flawlessly for me and for whoever has it after me too. But I think this is definitely a milestone, getting this engine out and doing it all in my little garage. So if that ain't worth a subscribe, I don't know what is. But while this engine's out, it does make sense to do some upgrades because the downpipes are so much easier to get to, the charge cooler is easier to get to, the suspension is easier to get to. So I think I might take full advantage of the fact that we've got this engine out and everything is so easy to access at the moment. But somehow that is not my biggest worry at the moment because we've still got to do more here. We've got to get all of the stuff off here so we can actually replace this chassis leg, which doesn't mean just replacing it to here. We've actually got to replace it all the way back here, which is going to be fun. So that means everything that you can see here has got to go. So in order to fit the new chassis leg, everything has to come off it. So that means all the heat shields, we need to take the master cylinder out, we need to just clear everything off that side of the car. And I'm praying that I can remember where it goes when it's done. Now, I'm not going to do all of it now because some of it means stripping the interior. So we will need to come back to that later, but we can get most of it off ready for when that interior comes out. Right, next day, and I've very quickly realised that I'm going to lose track of which parts it is that I'm going to need. So we need to stay organised on this, and as we're going along, make a list of every single part that's broken, get the part number off it if possible, and then try and source it for cheaper than what the main dealer wants. That's the goal anyway, and that's the only way that we're going to get this car fixed within a reasonable budget. So we're going to start on the engine and go through all of the broken pipes and bits and bobs that we're going to need to make that work perfectly and work our way outwards from there. So, you ready? It's going to be a big one. Because I want that engine to go back in perfectly working and not to have any messing around afterwards. So we're going to fully examine it and make sure we've got everything we need. But just before we do that, I did actually manage to get in touch with the original owner who crashed this car. And he gave me loads of information about how it all happened, the story of the car, where he got it, why bits are a certain way. And it was really, really interesting. But sometimes when you're buying a car, this isn't an option, so Car Vertical can help fill in that gap. And this is the report for my car. You can see it's got a green tick for mileage, theft, and financial and legal status, but an amber warning light for accidents, which does make sense. So Car Vertical checks over 35 countries to make sure your car's not previously stolen, and also checks all the mileage records to make sure that the mileage hasn't been rolled back on your car. And even though my car's high mileage, it's not been clocked, which is good. And then to the damage report, we can see my car has been previously damaged and marked as a category S, meaning it's an insurance write-off. And one of my favourite parts of the timeline, because you can see what's happened to your car and when, and it brings you loads of information. Like on my car, for example, it failed its first MOT on all of the tyres being bald, which isn't good. I managed to find this photo from the original owner of when my car was crashed, but Car Vertical can even show you photos from when a car's damaged at an auction site. Take for example this BMW X3 here. You can see that the damage is pretty nasty, and unless you know the quality of the repair, it may be one you want to consider avoiding. So to check out a car using Car Vertical, make sure to use discount code Chris and the link in the description to save yourself some money off your Car Vertical reports. Now let's see how many hundreds of parts are broken which need replacing on my car. So me and Tom went tirelessly through every broken part we could find on the engine, marking them off as we find them and the part number, and noting them down to make sure we don't forget to order them. We made sure to number each item and also paint pen that number on the part on the car too. And trust me when I say this took ages, because some of the part numbers were absolutely smashed to bits, so it did make it a lot more challenging trying to find them. So we now have a complete list of, well, I say a complete list, we have a list of some of the parts that we're going to need to get this car sort of sorted, from kind of coolant pipes and then to some of the plastics as well. This should get us most of the way there, to the point where the engine's running and the car's bolted back together, and then we've just got the things on the front and the finishing touches to do. And although all of this looks really bad, as I say, you can really see the chassis damage now, but I don't think this is actually too bad. This is 26 parts we've got here. Okay, yes, there's definitely going to be more than that. I'd probably say double the amount, but it could have been a lot worse. And I'm not going to say what else could go wrong, but I do think we've got away relatively lightly in terms of damage to the engine parts, at least, is what we're going to say for now, especially considering the way this car was crashed. Like I said earlier, I've managed to get in touch with the original owner and see how the car was crashed, and he said he was driving up a country road too fast, didn't see a 90-degree corner come in, locked up, and went straight into like a 20-foot wall. And the wall definitely won, but you know, this is definitely still repairable, and it should be a lot cheaper still than buying a non-crash damaged one. Saying that, I've probably just jinxed it. But there is one more thing I want to do with this engine before we even start presuming that it's actually okay. Do you want to guess what that is, Tom?
I don't know.
I want to cut open the oil filter and see if there's any chunks in there, because if there is, this could be game over.
It is worrying how little oil it has. Oh.
Obviously we've filled it up again now, but luckily with these, the oil filter is just about round here. So that means we should be able to take that off without losing too much oil.
Yes.
Right, let's do this. Let's see if it's bad news or not. Now, I had a few comments on the last video about the camera being a bit shaky, and I apologise about that. It's not actually the fault of the camera. I've just bought a new one, a Canon R6, which is a really good camera. The problem is me. I don't know how to set it up right. I'm a car guy, not a camera guy, so I think it should be a little bit better from this point here in this video. So hopefully it's a bit more pleasurable for you guys to watch. Let's see how bad this oil filter is. Here we go. I'm going to cut straight down the middle, I think. It's a little bit dirty, but oh, there is a...
Maybe we should get a clean magnet.
Yeah, we need to see if these bits are magnetic or not. There's like a fair bit of gunk, but what do you think? There's not loads, is there? But
I think a magnet would...
I think you're right. Oh, here we go. That's better.
Let's get a magnet and go from there.
And now I've stretched out the oil filter, you can see some little bits, but the question is the oil filter just doing its job? Does that count as wear and tear? What we've got here is the magnets from a magna plate kit. This is where you kind of magnetically put your number plate on, so you can remove it to like wash it, take it off, it shows, stuff like that. And you can see there's 4 magnets here, and they're really, really strong. I can't even... They're strong. So if there's anything magnetic in this filter, it's going to get picked up by this. I'm hoping that it's just kind of gunk and dirt and the oil filter is doing its job, and it's not, bits of bearing, because that would be a nightmare. So we've got the oil filter here, stretched it all out. Let's rub this all over it. There's a couple of little bits of dirt, but nothing that seems to have magnetised to it. When I say these magnets are strong, I mean they're really... Should we show how strong they are?
Yeah.
Because if there is anything magnetic on here, I wouldn't be able to get it off. It would be stuck on there, and I can literally wipe it clean. Right, one magnet, steel body.
You can hear that.
Yes. I literally can't get it off. Right. So my point being, if there was any chunks on that oil filter, then that would have been stuck to that magnet. So I think we've got away pretty well there.
You got to try and get that magnet off. I think the engine's alright.
Yeah, the engine's right, but that magnet's staying there now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the part numbers that we've got off here, get a price from BMW with a complete breakdown, and then I'm going to try and see what I can find on the second-hand market to save some money. Because, well, that's just what we do, isn't it? Time for a parts hunt, let's go! Right, so back behind the scenes, because you guys seem to have enjoyed me doing this with you in the past. So, we're going to try and see now if we can save some money on some of the parts from BMW. Now, I know already that some of these parts are astronomical. A steering rack alone is about £3 grand. I think a subframe is in the region of about 1.5 to 2. So there's definitely some money to be saved here if we can find these parts on eBay or somewhere else. Now, I've already made a slight start on this because I've already ordered a subframe which comes with a anti-roll bar and also some drop links as well, for a total of £877 delivered. So that's about half the price of what it costs from BMW. So already, big win. Now my first aim is to get the shell of the car mobile again, because we need to get it so it can be moved around, and then we can do all sorts of other stuff with it. So the next part to doing that is getting the new arms for the driver's side, and also getting a steering rack, because we can move it without one, but it would be much easier getting a new steering rack on there which isn't damaged, and then we can move it with a steering wheel and being pushed around. So on this photo here, which I'm going to put on screen now, there is a part number on the steering rack. It is 142890010. I can put that into eBay. Now this brings up quite a few different steering racks. So we've got one here for a 3 Series X Drive. We've got one for an X5, 6 and 7. We've got one for a 1 Series. We've got, you know, loads of other ones coming up for much cheaper than the price from BMW. This one here is £300, but the question is, are they the right one? So I've got all of the numbers off this one here, so I'm going to try and find a picture of one of these. Let's try this one. This is £170. It's a little bit dirty, so could use a bit of a clean up. But let's see if we can find the picture of all the numbers. So the numbers on this one don't directly match up with this one, but the actual number itself, the 142890010, does. So I'm not going to go for that one. This one does also look quite rough, to be honest. So now one thing that is quite difficult with these is deciphering which is the important number, because, well, sometimes, say for example, the top number on here ends in 05. That could just be a very minor revision, but it could also mean a whole load of different things. So it is quite hard. But there is one here actually. Oh, an X4M 2019 power steering rack. That sounds good. An X4M and an X3M are basically the same car with a different back end. So this could be good. Mine says 89274. This one says 9954401. The number here is different. That number's different. That's a UN. Mine's a UN, so that matches. The number here is the same, 142890010. And then the number underneath again is different. Now maybe the UN is the important part. That's quite possible. Now logic could say that that'd work, but I'm going to do a little bit of digging on that just to make sure, because it is quite expensive. It's 600 quid, again a lot cheaper than the BMW price, but it might not be it, even though it is, and it is coming from Lithuania. So we've got to be a little bit careful with that one, so we'll come back to that a little bit later. I'm struggling a little bit on the turbo actuator because it's only the electronic part at the front which is damaged, but I don't know the part number because it's smashed to bits. So again, not the easiest thing to find. Is it going to be the same across all of them? Is it going to be the same as the S55 engine? Who knows? It is a bit up in the air. Like, how are you supposed to know these things? It's very tricky sometimes. Now that is more like it. I know this was expensive from BMW, and I know some of you were saying that mine was salvageable, but it did have some damage on the intake area, quite a big crack in another area, so it's probably getting to that point where it's not worth repairing anymore. And for £180, I think it's definitely much better to put a nice new fresh one on rather than trying to repair and bodge that other one. Sometimes it is worth repairing parts, but in this case, with this one not being too expensive, I think I'm going to go for this. £180, get in my basket. Right, this is a prime example of what I mean by being careful when buying parts, because it'd be so easy to go and find someone breaking an X3M or an X4M, just buying all the bits you need thinking they're just M specific, and it's simply not the case. So the side radiators, which go kind of in the lower grills at the sides of the car in front of the wheels, now there is one here for an X4M, where's it gone? Here we go, genuine BMW X3M external radiator, £240 because it's off an M. Now the part number remains the same, it's 9468698. Yeah. Now you go back up to the top, right, there's new ones. Here, there is a new one for £173. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait to hear back from BMW on that and see if their price is roughly similar. I'm going to guess that it is, to be honest with you, rather than just going and biting the bullet and buying the X3M one thinking it's a special part. And it's much the same story with this here. This is a auxiliary water pump for my engine. Again, I've got the part number off it, which is 8651287. But you put that into eBay, and what does it bring up? A 320i G20 petrol auxiliary water pump with the same part number for only £60. So unless BMW can beat that price, that's the one I'm having. Now this is disgusting. I'm hoping BMW can beat these prices because there's 3 for sale and they're all astronomical. This is just the charge pipe which goes around the front of the engine. It's only about this big, just for a bit of pipe. Second hand, £490, £470 with £10 postage, and £480 with free postage. And they all look like they're from not the best places. It's a bit of pipe, it can't be that expensive surely. I bet BMW can beat that. They've got to be able to. I'm not having that, that is disgusting. Not on. Behave. It's obvious there's definitely some money to be saved, but we've got to be careful in doing it because I don't want to be had over buying some of these parts for what seems like stupid money. So still got to be vigilant, still got to be smart about it. But there is some parts I've just ordered straight away from BMW because I don't want to buy them second hand. So I've ordered the lower arms, including all new bolts. Then I have ordered some rod bearings because I've quickly come to realise that what I said earlier in the video was probably a bit of a mistake, because we ran a magnet over that oil filter, and even though nothing came off magnetically, I remembered rod bearings are not made out of steel. So we've ordered new rod bearings from there, and also bolts for that too, and also some sump gasket sealant, you know, the OEM stuff that they use. So that's definitely going to be something which we want to do because I don't want to risk blowing that engine up and just running it as it is. I think that's definitely the first thing to change and have a good look at and make sure everything's good there. I think it costs about £200 to do, so well worth the investment in the engine to try and future-proof it, and then that gives us the chance to pull the sump off as well and give everything a good clean out and make sure it's all hunky-dory. I've also ordered already a subframe for about £800, so that's on the way. So we're definitely off to a good start, and you know what, parts for this car don't seem too horrendous. Like, it could be a lot worse. There could be loads of parts which were like this because they'd be X3 or X4M specific, or you know, M3 or M4 specific, where it's simply not the case. It looks like they share a lot of parts with the smaller engine BMWs as well, which is good because it keeps manufacturing costs down, which means the prices are lower too because they're shared across more models, making them a less rare part. Great. I'm genuinely starting to think steering racks and this channel are just cursed, because there is actually a few X3M, X4M steering racks for sale, but none of the numbers match up. Now, I've spoken to a BMW breaker who's quite close to me, and they've took my VIN number and gave me back a list of the part numbers which will fit my car and just plug and play, you know, the superseded variants, and none of those match any of the ones that are for sale either. So there's these ones here which, even though they're from Germany, are right hand drive steering racks. Just load that. They don't come with the motor, but I think the one on mine's okay, and they're super cheap, £143, but again, the numbers just don't match. Well, one thing that does match is the UN and the ABM, they're both the same on mine. But yeah, nothing else apart from the 1428910, that matches. nothing else does. So do I chance it and just buy this £143 one and try and fit my motor and presume it's the same? Because this is from 2017 to 2020, mine's a 2019, so it fits in that. It's for a right-hand drive car. Yeah, I don't know. So I can either do that, or I can buy the more expensive X4M one that we've seen earlier in the video where none of the numbers match, or I could go and buy a brand new one for £3 grand, which I definitely do not want to do, because £143, if I can get it fixed for that, that'd be a steal, wouldn't it, really? What would you do? Let me know in the comments section. Well, I've got a lot more hunting for parts to do, and to see what I've done, you guys are gonna have to wait until the next video. But for now, don't forget to like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I will catch you next time.